When you're young, everything you do feels like it's wearing a neon sign. Look at me, I'm trying to be a real adult. You put on a suit that doesn't quite fit. You practice your handshake so it's neither limp fish nor crushing claw. You sit in a meeting and you say something you thought sounded brilliant, only to see the older guy across the table give you a half smile, the kind normally reserved for a golden retriever that brings in the paper. And the frustrating part is, you might actually be right. You might have read more and thought harder and worked longer hours than anyone else in the room. But your age, or your face, or your lack of visible grey hairs, short-circuits the entire evaluation process. People have heuristics, and one of them is, young people probably don't know what they're talking about. This has always been the case. Aristotle taught that youth was prone to passion and excess. Roman law set minimum ages for political officers, just in case an overeager 19-year-old decided he was ready to command an army. Even in the Enlightenment, when salons were filled with sharp young minds, credibility usually went to people who looked like they'd already lost a little hairline. So you face a weird puzzle. How do you get taken seriously when your very existence triggers doubt? There are good reasons people trust older folks more. They've seen cycles repeat, they've watched fads flame out, they have scars, and scars signal experience. When Cicero stood up in the Roman Senate, everyone knew he'd seen enough backroom scheming to know what he was talking about. When a 23-year-old stands up and insists they have a grand plan, the default assumption is this person hasn't lived long enough to know all the ways that the world can crush them. It's not even malice, it's probability. If you randomly select a 22-year-old and a 52-year-old, who's more likely to have made every dumb mistake once already? Who's more likely to be cautious where caution is needed? And this is why listen to your elders became a cliche in basically every culture. But heuristics aren't always right. Sometimes the older person is entrenched, cynical, and risk-averse. Sometimes the younger person is genuinely better attuned to what's happening. The French Revolution wasn't led by retirees. Silicon Valley isn't powered by septuagenarians. And Blaise Pascal didn't wait until he was 40 to invent the calculator. This is the double bind of youth. The difficulty is that as a young person, you often respond by overcompensating. You start dressing older, talking older, borrowing other people's gravitas. The law student who lards every sentence with Latin. The 25-year-old founder who thinks swagger is a substitute for wisdom. The analyst who tries to mimic their boss's weary cynicism. This rarely works. People can tell when you're doing an impression. And then there's the other failure mode, leaning into youth. We're the kids who are going to disrupt everything. That works until you trip on the first regulatory filing or the first budget meeting. Youth can be charming, but charm isn't the same as authority. The simplest way to be taken seriously is to do something undeniable. Napoleon became a general in his 20s, not because the French military suddenly thought 20-somethings were wise. It was because he kept winning battles. Ramanujan was respected not because of his age or lack of it, but because his notebooks were filled with astonishing theorems. When you don't have years of accumulated reputation, you need artifacts. Code you've written, papers you've published, deals you've closed, organizations you've built. Talk alone won't do it. Even the best rhetoric without results risks being read as youthful enthusiasm. Which means, yes, the bar is higher for you. If a 50-year-old gives a decent idea, people assume it's grounded in something unseen. If you give an even better idea, you'll be asked for receipts. And this feels unfair, but it's how heuristics get updated. The good news is that once you start producing visible work, the young label doesn't entirely disappear, but it starts to lose its grip. One of the oldest tricks is alliance. Young revolutionaries in 1848 didn't gain ground until older figures lent them legitimacy. John Stuart Mill wasn't operating in a vacuum. He had Bentham and his father as intellectual patrons. Even in modern careers, people often take you seriously once someone they already trust signals that you're worth listening to. This can sound cynical, but it's pragmatic. If you can't lean on age, lean on networks, find mentors, collaborate across generations. Authority is contagious, and sometimes you need to catch it before you can grow your own. There is an internal game being played here, a psychological piece. If you expect to be dismissed, you'll act in ways that invite dismissal. You hedge your points, apologize for speaking, wait for permission. People sense this, and they treat you accordingly. The paradox is that authority often comes from acting as if you already have it. Shakespeare's Prince Hal doesn't wait until everyone thinks he's kingly. He decides to perform kingliness until it sticks. Fake it till you make it is a terrible slogan when it encourages lying, but it has some truth in the sense of posture. People mirror your self-conception. The trick is doing this without tipping into delusion. You don't want to be the startup founder declaring yourself the next Steve Jobs in year one. But you also don't want to be the grad student who keeps prefacing their ideas with, "This is probably going to sound dumb." The good news is that time is on your side. Sort of. Because there's one final point. The problem of being young solves itself. If you don't flame out, if you keep producing, time will eventually make you credible. Cicero, Mill, they all aged into authority. If you can endure the awkward years without losing your spark, you'll find that seriousness eventually attaches to you almost by default. But there's also a danger in trying so hard to be taken seriously. You can lose the energy of youth, the willingness to take big risks, to build things without asking permission, to ignore entrenched wisdom long enough to stumble into something new. And that's why the puzzle is genuinely hard. You need to cultivate seriousness while keeping the recklessness that made you start in the first place. So what do you do? Practically, what do you do? The unromantic answer is produce visible work, find allies, project authority, and keep showing up. The romantic answer is accept that youth will always be a liability in some rooms and an asset in others, and learn to play both sides. And maybe the honest answer is that being taken seriously is less important than doing serious things. People didn't take Mary Shelley seriously because she was 19. They took Frankenstein seriously. If your work has weight, people will eventually stop noticing how old you are.